All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the Cohesion podcast. Today, I'm joined by Sarah Lovelace, VP of People at Airbase. Sarah joined the global organization in 2021 and brought a wealth of knowledge from fast growing companies like Box and Plenty. Welcome to the show, Sarah.
Thank you so much for having me, Shawn. It's a pleasure to be here today.
I'm sorry I caught you mid coffee sip when
Oh,
we
that's
kicked things
okay.
off. Yeah.
That's okay. That's okay. Coffee will join me today.
Well, we'd like to kick things off by getting to know you a little bit better. Nothing super personal, well, unless you want to reveal super personal things. But I've got
Okay.
well, I only have like 4 get to know you questions.
Okay. Great.
So the first one is, what's an insult you've received that you're proud of?
You're too nice. No, I'm
Oh,
serious.
that's great. It was an insult when somebody said it?
Well, I mean, technically no. So, and I doubt that, and I have like 3 people in mind who have said this to me, all of whom I consider, really close partners in work, mentors. I don't think that they meant it like truly as like an insult, but the way that it, came across, it was, effectively all coming from dudes. And, it's like, hey, if you're ever going to continue to progress in your career, I think you're just too nice.
Wow.
And it's something that I was told when I was 27, when I was in my mid 30s, in my later 30s. And it's always something that's just sort of stuck with me. And candidly, I think it's but I don't know. Check in with me in 20 years and see where I am. Maybe I'll feel differently.
Find out what you say then. What do, I mean? Do you think, like when you said that came from men? Because I think most people that would say they've worked with me would say that I'm extremely nice, but I would never get a.
You would probably never get
nice.
that. Yeah. I don't think that you would ever, I don't think that you would ever get that. And I think, I think sometimes as you progress in your career, and you become, an executive, I think everyone has this sort of like an idea of like what they think an executive, sometimes, sometimes I will, will look like, and, and in business, like you need to like make the tough decisions, and to make the tough decisions, like, you can't always be this sort of, nice and warm person. And I think that sometimes what people forget is that, you can actually be a very, nice, warm, approachable person. It also doesn't mean that you don't have the ability to make hard decisions,
Right.
especially hard decisions around, people and like overall, like, organizational path. And those two things, can exist. You can be, a female that, likes to wear, jewelry and nail polish and all these kinds of things, and, not be this like very like, tall person. You can be those things and still do what's required of the business as well.
Second question, and it sounds like we're going to keep diving deep on every single one probably. What are the top 5 most opened apps on your phone?
Oh, okay. Audible.
Oh, right on.
Audible. My podcast app. Spotify. I mean, those are hands down. I can't think of the other, honestly, I cannot think of the other 2. Like those 3, like constantly open.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, I am jealous. I wish that those were my 3, because that means I'm not looking at my phone.
Ah.
Right.
Okay.
Listening and getting the information. Yeah. I actually think that's the direction we'll go overall,
I hope so.
like over time.
Yeah.
Less of the looking at the screen and more being able to have conversations. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that that's something that, at least for me, has changed a lot, especially in the last, my job became at Airbase. We are a, fully remote global organization. And so for the first time, other than, what was dictated by COVID, it was the first time I spent 100% of my time working from home.
Yeah.
And so if you're not in, if you have a day where you have like a few less meetings, sometimes I find I am at home all the day, like all day by myself, with my dog Frank, who I love dearly, but doesn't talk doesn't talk to me, and so sometimes I find like listening to something, going on a walk, it kind of started to become like my version of a commute to work in the morning,
Yeah. Yeah.
and and a nice way to sort of just take a really quick break from work, get a little bit of like distance, maybe have like a new idea, like pop in without having
Yeah.
it be something that I was necessarily looking at on my
Yeah.
phone.
Oh, wow. Any current book recommendations? Are you a nonfiction listener or a
I'm
fiction?
definitely, so I'm definitely fiction right now. As my twin sister says, we're in October, so we're in our spooky season. So we're definitely definitely listening to some books about supernatural things. Again, we're coming up to Halloween and the holidays. Always a really, this is so nerdy, always really a great time to listen to Harry Potter again. Um,
Oh,
it's so good. I'm just waiting for the day that my kids are old enough to start reading those books to them. I cannot wait. Cannot
nice.
wait.
What is a common myth about your fields of expertise?
Yes. That all I do all day is just listen to people's problems, and I'm effectively their therapist.
I have heard that so many
Uh-huh.
times.
Yep.
Okay, final question.
Uh-huh.
And sort of you have to put on your, hey, listen, you're in your spooky season, so this
I
totally
am in my
works.
spooky season.
You're in your
Yes.
spooky season. If
Uh-huh.
you could know the answer to one mystery,
Uh-huh.
what would it be?
What causes migraines?
Oh wow, it's not even spooky at all. I mean,
It's not
could be
it's not
spooky.
even no, it's not even spooky. But like the true cause of a migraine, and how do we fix it?
So it's because you're asking for a friend, right?
Oh, totally. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I never get them. I'm yeah, picture of health.
Well, okay, so let's dive right into the deep end. So big question for you. How would you describe your leadership style? So both at Airbase and previous to that, and how has it changed over the years?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of the core of like what has made me like me, has, say we talked about we talked about being nice and and direct, but I think from just like a leadership style, if this counts as a style, um, I like to work with people that I enjoy spending time with, that I enjoy tackling problems with, who think and approach something different than me. I'm never looking for someone to join my team who's an exact replica of me. In fact, I want the absolute opposite of that.
Yeah.
And I enjoy having a team that's a little bit more of a counterbalance in that way. Um, and so I think my leadership style is it's very inclusive, it's very open. If my team is the one that is having the ideas and bringing the work forward, like that should be celebrated. But I think overall pretty inclusive.
Yeah. Would you say two things that you mentioned in there? One of them, spending time with them. Is that just spending time with them at work, or are these types of people, even if you don't spend time with them outside of work, like you would spend time with them outside of work?
I think it can be both. I think
Yeah.
one thing that has definitely, changed for me, over the last however many years I've been in the workplace.
Hmm.
I used to think that, having someone on your team or that you worked with that liked, it's like you had to think of them almost like as your friend. Oh, we have to be friends. And it's
Right.
like, okay, like that's what, 20-year-old Sarah thought, and now, like, yes, some of the people that work for me now, I definitely, would consider friends. But I think there also is a difference between people that you professionally enjoy working with, and then, friends. And it's okay for those two things not to, it's 100% okay for those two not to be the same.
100% okay for them not. Yeah, absolutely. I the only reason I ask is that it's come up a lot. This new, I don't know if it's a new thing on the balance. Like I think even used to be more hardline. They're not your friends, and then that's kind
Oh,
of like softened a little bit. It seems with
oh,
other folks we've had conversations.
interesting. Okay, so I have actually had the complete opposite experience with
Oh,
that.
interesting.
I was a very early on employee of Box. I joined in 2010. Um, Freaking fantastic company.
Yeah,
The company was about 60 people when I joined. I spent just shy of 7 years there. By the time I left, we were a little over 1,200. We had gone public. I mean, just like the coolest
yeah.
experience to have, like, truly as like your first tech job, which kind
Hmm.
of spoils it for a lot of other things because you think, oh, this is the norm, and it is not the norm. But in the early, a lot has changed, and a lot changed in the 7 years that I was there about our interview practices and what we would look for in people. But we used to have
Yeah,
this thing called like, and we would talk about it pretty openly, and we talk about like the car test and how, okay, do you want to spend 7 hours in a car with this person?
oh,
And you're driving from San Francisco to LA, like, are you okay to be stuck in traffic with them? And I think in some ways it was, it definitely helped sort of like build the foundation of the company because we all spent so much time in the office together. We always all
yeah,
wanted to be together. But then you also end up sort of like creating this, like, you kind of like insular environment in a way. And even, one of my who ironically has become my best friend now. When we interviewed her to join the recruiting team, like early on, I said to, our manager, I was like, well, I'll definitely be able to work with her, but I don't ever think we'll become friends. And I'm like, okay, what kind of interview feedback is that? Is absolutely like absurd and ridiculous. I can never imagine those words coming out of my mouth today. And so maybe it's like a phase of life thing, where I have a few extra years on, what I did in my earlier days at Box. I have kids, married, got the dog. I think maybe it's just that my priorities and what I'm looking for in a work environment have changed,
yeah,
where I have things outside of work. But I've actually sort of found, and again, and maybe the pandemic and remote work has changed this a little bit. Like, people aren't looking to spend every single waking hour at work with the people that they work with. I hope a lot of those days are gone because probably not super healthy to do that.
yeah,
And I know that it was always like a big perk, right? At like a, a Google or Facebook where you can do your laundry there, and like they have, medical professionals on staff, and the
yeah,
public library will come. And I think everyone always thought, oh, it's such a cool perk. And it's like, yes, it is, but it's also a way to keep you at work longer. And I've definitely seen a lot of that, changing. And I know that a lot of people are coming back into office again. And I hope we don't fully ever get back to that point again, because I think it's also important to be a balanced human being.
yeah,
And, I love working, but I also really enjoy my family and, having things that I enjoy doing outside of work too.
yeah. It was a badge of honor. Sometimes the amount of
Yeah.
work that you would do, or the amount of time you
Yep.
would spend there. I would
100%.
go to meetings at Facebook, aka Meta. Go to
Meta.
meetings, and I would see like they had a bike shop, they had a print shop, they had
Yep.
doctors, they had
Yep.
and I remember at the
Everything.
time thinking, great, like that would be amazing.
No.
But
Mm-mm.
it's a trap. Leading into a little bit, when you were there, took the company public, did you feel like you had to have a different leadership style when you have the slide, you have the other types of things as you kind of move forward through startup mode into what you're doing now, besides the trying to figure out work life balance? Like if you're leading people, what's different as you're sort of growing up as a company,
Yeah.
I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I think that and for my time at Box, I had a very different role than than I do now. When I started at Box, I started at one of the most like entry level roles in the company. I started as a recruiting coordinator, and then, by the time I left, I was helping to sort of interim run the recruiting team. I had done a lot of like recruiting ops, like people ops work, and would long slide presentations that are like a whole
Yeah.
other story, ops review. I think that at least, for me, I don't know if for me personally, a whole lot changed in that time period because,
Yeah.
I wasn't necessarily part of the executive team. I had joined and was there when a lot of the executives had joined, and part of the reason after 7 years, I was like, or almost 7 years, I was okay, it's time to move on. Is I felt like I was ready to grow more
Hmm.
and could have been very happy staying at the company, but because I had joined so early and because it was so early in my career, a lot of the executives that were at Box in the early days, a lot of them are still there today,
Oh,
which
wow.
is absolutely like fantastic and amazing. But I think you also get to a certain point where you're maybe ready to grow, but people will never see you in a different light.
Yeah.
Like I was always going to be like the recruiting person there, which is totally fine. And it's like amazing. It's an amazing role, but I
Yeah.
don't think I was ever going to be seen necessarily outside of that role. So I don't know if my style changed a lot. Maybe I was like, I'll put a little bit more in a box than I wanted to be.
Yeah.
And so I sort of made this conscious choice of I'm not unhappy here. But if I am going to grow and I want to sort of change and how I am professionally in the workplace, it probably would be a good time to move on.
Yeah. That's a big deal for a lot of people to leave something where they've got that love.
Oh
Like
yeah.
for them, they're comfortable, they're good, they've got the
Yes.
respect, and then being able to take that leap to go somewhere else or to take on more of a leadership role. So it's really courageous, I think,
I think I
what you
had
did.
also, and I think, I had also being in the role that I was in, and, again, you're early on, you're on the people team, you build a lot of relationships with people, a lot of relationships. And so I had seen a lot of people get to the point where they were a little unhappy and like disgruntled. And like, it's like they waited a little bit too long to make that
Oh, you're
exit.
right. Yeah.
And so I watched that happen, time and time again. And I thought, you know what, I'm like, I don't want to be that person.
Hmm.
Um, and so I think I, started to see some of the signs in myself that I was ready for the next thing. And I was like, okay, I think I've got about a year. And so I started to look about a year in advance of, okay, I think I will be ready to sort of eject at that point.
Yeah.
And I've also spent like almost 7 years building this amazing company and having, great brand and, really being close with, the two founders and the two technical founders. Like, I don't want to damage that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so like, I knew that for myself. And I also had watched all of these people leave Box to go to the next Box. Oh, it's Box in the early days, and like these things that they were going to go and try and recreate. And
Yeah.
so I knew when I left, I was like, I'm going to go find something that's completely the antithesis of Box. I don't want to go try and recreate that in any way, shape, or form. And I didn't. And that ended up being Plenty, which is a vertical indoor farming company that was
Yeah.
full
It's
like
definitely
it
different.
was
Yeah.
definitely like it was completely different in every single way, and just a like absolute like burst of learning and experience.
So a follow-up question to your leadership, I mean, related to your leadership style. You said you knew like a year before, which is nuts to me that you could sort of figure that out. Do you work that way also as a leader now at Airbase? do you look forward a year as you make decisions and come up with what the solutions might be, or increasing employee engagement, or where do you
Oh, of
focus?
course. Yes, of course, Shawn. I have full foresight a year in advance. No,
For a
no.
moment before you said my name, I was like, wow, that's pretty
Wow.
amazing. Yeah.
I mean, oh my gosh, there is nothing that I would love to say more than like, absolutely yes. But I think the truth of the matter is, especially, and maybe for folks, I have never been a public company, CPO. I would, love to kind of go through that journey with a company one day.
Yeah.
Maybe when you get to a slightly larger organization, right, it takes longer to put programs into place, right? And so you're having to think farther in advance. I'm assuming there's more, predictability within the business. I think,
Yeah.
especially when you're in startup mode, um, and whether you're 6 people, you're 60 people, you're 350 people, you just don't have that predictability in the business yet. And so whatever
Yeah.
plan, you always need to have a plan that goes out about 12 months. But if you're not revisiting it at least every quarter, you are going to go way off course. And so a lot of the things that that we'll do on the people team, yes, sure, there are some things that we will sort of put on the calendar a year in advance, right? Like
Yeah. 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 That makes
you're
sense. Open
always
enrollment.
open enrollment,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
compensation, like
Yeah.
compensation cycle, right? So
Performance
you're all
reviews. Yeah. Yeah.
it's oh we don't I don't believe in the performance review,
Oh,
but
that's
like
fantastic. You don't do it. Yeah.
we don't do no we don't do it. And so you're always thinking about those things. And I would say sort of like the most like foresight, I think, at least at a 350-person company that you can have is sort of knowing like your schedule of when things roughly are going to happen during the year that
Yeah.
are required to happen, when you have those moments of space to to go back and fix and to work on the debt that you've built up. And then also knowing that the thing, what am I trying to say? Like the thing that you sort of like, put out, like the first version of it, knowing, okay, what are the things that I'm going to do differently when I do it next year? And how am I sort of like going to build on top of it? I think
Yeah.
in a startup, that's honestly like the most you could ever ask for. And I would say the only other thing that you really do have to try to have a lot of foresight in is like your executive and leadership team,
Yeah.
and making sure you have the right people in place for at least the next 18 to 24 months. And if you think you don't, you have to start almost 2 years in advance of that,
Yeah.
because it does take a while to hire the right person, to onboard the right person, to get their sort of like leadership mentality and like the way that they lead, right? You may be all looking for the same outcome, but the way that one person is going to get there is going to be very different than someone else. So I think that probably is a place where you have to be a little bit more predictive.
Yeah.
And I think everything else, you have to just look at it in real time.
You, I had heard that's great for the
Hmm.
long
Hmm.
term. I'd heard you do something a little bit more short term, for you personally, and that
I
you
do.
try to do something different every quarter. Is that what it was?
Every quarter. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think that like on paper, it probably doesn't look like my job has changed every
Okay.
quarter, because it
Yeah.
hasn't. What the things that I'm responsible for haven't changed. But mentally, I do try and shift up my role a little bit every single quarter.
Mhm.
And so if I think sort of like early on in my career, and one of the really cool special things about being at Box, again, it's, everyone was sort of in the same or different sort of phases of their life, but, Box did a really great job of having a lot of like learning and like having different departments sort of share what they were working on. And so, I remember sitting in these all hands, like, I mean, just taking like copious amount of notes about like, like digital marketing and lead gen and branding, or, what the finance team was doing, and thinking, okay, how does a lot of this apply to like, what I'm doing? And so, there were some quarters where I was like, okay, like this is going to be this is going to be my data quarter.
Yeah.
I taught myself, it was at the time, Excel, obviously it's Google Sheets now. But I taught myself how to model. I think I'm a low key, pretty good modeler today.
Low key, pretty. I think
I'm a
that means
really
you're
good.
a good modeler. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And
yeah,
I
yeah,
look, I love to spend time in my spreadsheets. I could tinker away for hours at them. But I thought, okay, I'm gonna teach myself how to do this, and I'm gonna teach myself, how to sort of like forecast a recruiting funnel. Or I'm gonna take different things that I've, heard the marketing team talk about. I'm gonna try and understand like those concepts and that lingo, and then apply it to how we're doing, maybe branding on the recruiting side. Or there's something in the sales journey of how they're talking about
yeah,
qualified leads. How can we think about that from from a hiring perspective? Okay, the product management team is talking about the first version of a product that's going to go out there, and how
yeah,
they think about getting user adoption. How can we think about, when we're rolling out a new learning and development program, or an engagement survey, or trying to get adoption within the company? How can I use some of those principles? And so it's not that fundamentally the things that I was actually doing changed, but I
yeah,
think sometimes it's just about like slightly shifting the mindset. And maybe you're not going to do something different or get a different result, but it will it mentally keeps you engaged. And the more engaged you are and excited about what you're doing, the better the work product is going to be.
yeah,
um, and it's also fun. I think that's part of the reason why I love being a people leader, is that it's all about finding like the connections of different things. And so it's really fun to find connections in what other departments are doing and what I'm doing.
yeah.
To really enjoy doing quite a bit.
No, I love it. Yeah, engagement. That sounds so silly for me to be like engagement, huge. But like, I wonder. One of the pieces of that, we talk about this a lot on the show, and I want to do it little bit different. So instead of just how do you how do you build trust with people? Because
Mm-hmm.
that's important in what you're talking about. Let's go the other way, because you mentioned spreadsheets.
Mm-hmm.
How do you measure trust at a company, and kind of expose then what it is going that direction?
I think that like measuring it, I think measuring it it can be hard to do. And I don't know, maybe other people feel differently about this.
Yeah, yeah,
I don't know if it's necessarily like, one metric that you're putting in place to say like, yes, we're building trust with the employee base. But I
yeah,
think
yeah,
you see it show up in a lot of different ways. I think, you ultimately see it in I think you ultimately see it in tenure and in, attrition.
yeah,
While I don't think that, if you have low tenure and high attrition, do I think it means that like you haven't built trust in the organization? Maybe not. But I think that if you do tend to have, higher tenure, lower attrition rates, a lot of it can be because ultimately the people at the company, trust the vision that the CEO and ultimately like the executive team has. And I think that's sort of your standard marker, at the end. I also think that you see it show up in engagement
yeah,
surveys. You see it show up in Glassdoor. You see it show up, more qualitatively in comments in the general channel in Slack, or the questions that people ask in all hands meetings, or also just candidly the questions that people ask. We're the people team at Airbase, but the questions that people one-on-one ask
right,
the people
yeah,
team, right? And sort
yeah,
of
yeah,
how those sort of show up and percolate. I think it's one thing to be one way in an open forum, and then sometimes people get behind closed doors and you know can sometimes be very different. And so I think if you've built ultimately trust within the organization, you see people show up in the same way across all the different forums.
yeah. Two things you sort of bring to mind for me, and I really appreciate. One of the it sounds like in the way that you describe it, especially general channel reactions, comments, questions that come up, like they're almost, maybe it's not a number, or maybe it is. Maybe somebody can come up with a number. But imagine reporting on that. Like for the team, they have their monthly business review, and you show up and you'll be like, "All right, here's what our trust score is," and everybody
Yeah.
believes it, and everybody
Yeah.
trusts it. That would be, I mean, just super, super, super powerful
Yeah.
to be able to put
Can you
something like
trust,
that
but
together.
then can you trust the trust score?
I know. I guess
I
it
just,
depends on which executive you're talking
yeah,
to.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly. I think I think you have to look at ultimately in like a very, like in a very holistic, way, because it's a, like, I think trust is a big thing, and the way
Mhm.
that you measure it should also be a big thing as well. And I don't think that
Yeah,
one thing is ever fully gonna tell the story, right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I always tell people, like, yes, the spreadsheets and the numbers, they're absolutely amazing and you need them for everything. But like our job as, as the people team is to have the data, to have the information, to be able to pull it together ourselves, to be able to, and to be able to quantify it. But we
yeah,
also have to be able to tell the story of what's happening in that, cell in a spreadsheet as well.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, you when you talk about all the different areas, it, one of the things that comes to mind, it's almost like you maybe there's not a trust score in how you measure or how you develop trust with folks at your company, but it affects everything else. So if you're
It
getting
does.
business results, if people are sticking around, if you're
Hmm.
able to move at speed, everybody talks about high performance culture or something that goes with that. Like
Yeah,
I think that comes sort of that happens when people trust each other.
it
That
does.
they,
It
yeah,
does. And I think, a lot of it really, ultimately, and I think sort of, trust and culture, they go hand in hand. And a lot of it really comes from, I think that, people can say it's a sort of, it is shared ultimately at the end of the day between everyone within the company, but ultimately it comes from the top down. And it
yeah,
comes from the CEO and organizations, employees. They're made within like the sun of their leader. And I think one thing at Airbase that that our CEO Tejo has just done an incredible job with is building trust within the organization. And the way that he has done that, especially in a remote environment, we're very open with our employee base. I've lived, I think like transparent is like a little bit of a buzzy
right,
word, because
right,
it can mean
right,
a
yeah,
lot of different things to a lot of different people. But the way that that shows up for us, we talk a lot about like the decisions that we make, why we make the decisions. We go through our financials with the organization every single quarter. If we're making, changes and decisions in our product roadmap, we'll talk about, why we're doing it, why we think it's important, not because we want necessarily everyone doesn't need to agree with it, but we want
right,
people to understand the thought process behind it. We'll share all of our, as much as we can, we'll share our board materials with the organization, to sort of like demystify that part of it. And it's
yeah.
sort of like all these little like building blocks that you put in place so that, we talk about, how we do our comp, why we do it, our philosophy. Not everybody agrees with it, which is totally
Right.
okay, but we talk a lot about it and we put those building blocks in place so that when you do ever have like road bumps within the organization, or, like a year like, last year, which I think for most startups was a little bit challenging, right? You can have those road bumps. You can talk to the organization about it, and it doesn't have to become like, this sort of like big explosive effect, because you've laid the groundwork. Like you don't ultimately just get to wake up one day and say, I'm gonna have the organization trust me. Like it takes years of doing it, and it takes years of putting all the right things in place. We have this thing also called like the newspaper test, where you want to make sure that, again, like the decisions that you are making that maybe are not like fully public. Well, let's say that it did go public, right? And like the way,
Yeah.
maybe it's the way that you're treating someone on the way out, or the decisions that you're making when the one person comes to you and asks for a raise. well, what if you do say yes out of cycle? What if everyone else finds out? All right, what if that is just splashed up on the headlines of a newspaper? Like, can you
Yeah.
defend it? Is it fair? And so I think it's, again, all of those things over time that just help you as a leadership team
Yeah.
ultimately build trust with the people who've chosen to come and work for you.
Wow. The newspaper test.
The newspaper test.
Yeah, I love that. I've never yeah, I haven't heard that. I haven't heard that before. And we talk about it from a sense of like I've worked with PR, I've worked with big comms teams. We talk about it in that sense, but from a people sense, that totally makes sense to look at something like that. And one of the values, it seems I don't know exactly what it might be at Airbus, but at Airbase this tell the truth or be open as much as you can on what you're working on. What are the other values that drive the people team and what you do at Airbase, and how does that affect then the results?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like, ultimately at the end of the day, as a people team, you have to like the people and you have to, right, you have to want to treat everyone, with the sense of, being a good human, right? And I think that's just sort of, that sounds so silly to say, but, I have met people in people roles and
Yeah,
they get annoyed by the people,
I
and I
know
think,
that. Yeah,
and ultimately, and I don't say this to like diminish, I don't say this to diminish the work of, what we do as, as a team and an organization, but ultimately, like, we are part of GNA with finance and legal and,
right.
and IT, and like we're the backbone operation of the company, which is ultimately like it's part of a service organization. And so, I think you have to be really there to, to help support people. It doesn't mean that, you're a doormat, um, you know, but you have to ultimately, like, enjoy interacting with people on a day-to-day basis.
It shouldn't be.
Um,
You're right. It shouldn't be easier said than done. You would assume that if people choose that type of
mhm.
career and want to do
Yeah.
that, that they like people. But I've experienced that 1,000%. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you also, you're also always constantly, in this place where there always is going to be, some like push and pull between maybe some of the things that you want to do and then also the things that are like, right for the business as well.
for sure.
And, sometimes you have to think about them in two separate buckets and then find ways to, to marry the two together. But I think a trap also that people get into is, oh, well, to be a really good people leader, I have to make sure that people like me and I have to go like, and I have to put in like all of these like a well over the top programs like the ping pong tables and the slides and
That's right.
free lunch and and all of these, like all of these types of things, but they also have to like marry in with the business as well.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Something that comes to mind when you said that is that when you legitimately like thoroughly care about the people you're working with, like even regardless of their like you assume their performance, there's something else going on other than they don't want to be at the company. But all of the programs you come up with, so professional development or learning and development, working on all hands, working with
Hmm.
executives, none of that is then a checkbox like, oh, I did it, oh, we set this goal for the year. It always has a, we're doing this so that because we care about the success of our employees, which is much more motivating to me, I guess. Or
Yeah,
maybe not.
I mean, I think so, like ultimately, ultimately yes, like you do those things because you care about your employees, but like ultimately at the end of the day, like the reason that you do all of those different things is because you care about, like, we're here to run a business, right? And like you
Sure.
care about, right, ultimately like the success of the business. And the more engaged your team is, the more, they're learning, you have the right people in the right roles, of course, then hopefully that means, success in the, in the business as well. But those things aren't a checkbox. I heard someone say this, and so I mean I cannot take credit for this, but I think it's such a it has really helped me think about the types of things and the programs that we do. But I like to think of our team and like the programs that we do, like, we are the product managers and our product is the people, right?
Oh,
And so
interesting.
as we
Yeah.
think about, the different, that it's not a comp process, it's a comp program. And, and our job is to, share the structure, share the timeline, right? Make sure that people, kind of understand it, holistically, and then they can help sort of, move through it. And then the outcome of it then helps, drive like the next iteration of it.
Yeah.
But it becomes about like all these different, programs and getting, and getting adoption in them and getting buy-in in them versus just like the thing to do. And constantly in programs, you don't just do them and check a box, right? With
Yeah.
a product, for example, like you're always measuring the success and the adoption and, the pass-through rates and the stickiness of it. And then how do you, keep doing the things that are super sticky and that people really like, and then get rid of the things that are just like no longer serving you.
Yeah. So it's more literal MVP in that situation instead of just a
Yes,
metaphor or figuratively what
exactly.
you're
It
talking about.
is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
yes.
Oh, that's yeah, that's fantastic. That's really powerful. So moving on, just we talked about it a little bit at the top. Your experience as a leader and how that's informed the way that you operate now. What do you do at Airbase? Is there anything unique that you do at Airbase to develop leaders, to develop managers? I know a lot of time we like to separate those, and there's a difference between. But what do you do to support them so
Yeah.
that they then can support your employees?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, okay, little controversial.
Oh,
Like, I hope,
fantastic!
hope that's
Yeah,
okay to say.
go for it.
I, okay, so there's like, and, and I say this was sort of like do I fully believe this? No. But I sort of in this,
What a preface! What
what a
what a
preface and like
hedging your
what a
bets.
lead up. Well, I mean, so I think fundamentally, I think that, oh my gosh, I can't believe I could say this. I think that most learning and development programs are just complete.
No, we're good
Um,
friends. We need
okay.
to we need to continue to connect on
Yeah,
this. Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah,
just,
yeah.
yeah. And I think that a lot of the times that they are, they're put out there as like a checkbox to the organization,
Sure.
to say like, we did it.
Hmm.
And this is the thing that we've done. And I think a lot of the times that's just what they're there for. And I have been to some really like, amazing sort of leadership development,
Yeah.
programs and done the full day workshops. I think that there are, through the years that I've done them and where I have been a participant, there's probably about three things ultimately I think that I can remember from those. Like that's it. And so I think at Airbase, a lot of what we've really tried to do, and again, also, we're very stage appropriate. We're 350 people. Someone asked me recently, like, well, who's your leader, like L&D person? And I'm like, what? Like, we're 350
We're
people. Like,
350 people.
if I hired, we're a global organization. If I hired an L&D person at 350 people, if I thought as a people leader that was a really good idea, as like, one
Yeah.
of the core fundamental people, I think you should look at me and say, what kind of decisions are you making? But what we've tried to do at Airbus and what I hope we've been able to accomplish, a lot of the learning, for managers and form leaders. I mean, it comes from like the day-to-day things that you're doing and experiencing, right? Like,
Hmm.
where you have a sticky employee situation come up. And what ultimately, like to me, those programs do, they actually just help connect people and they help, bond them together and they help them get to know each other so that when you're having an issue as an engineering manager and you
Hmm.
remember from this L&D class, there's a really amazing manager in marketing or in sales or in product. Oh, I remember they actually had some good advice about something like that. Let me
Yeah.
just go like reach out to that person. And it actually helps your managers get to know each other so that they can like in real time problem solve. Because that's ultimately like what's going to help people learn and develop is in those situations. And I think as managers, there's no there's some things that you can like fast track, but like,
Yeah.
and again, I heard someone say this once. I don't know if I like the expression, but I think it really works in this case. As a manager, I think it equates to the same thing as you can't put, 9 pregnant women in a room and get a baby in a month. Like it still takes 9 months to like bake the baby.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
little over 9 months really. But like as a manager, like you can't fast track that experience. Like you have to go through all of the seasons and you have to go through the reviews. You have to go through having a first hard conversation with an employee. And sometimes there's just not a time limit on that. And so I think, ultimately those L&D programs sometimes aim to like fast track that. Um, and I think some of them are like, they really truly are amazing. And some of the facilitators like absolutely amazing.
Right.
But I have truly found like the best value is again getting to know managers. And so, at Airbase, we've done a few things here and there. For the last about year, we've done about one a quarter roughly.
Yeah.
So yeah, about one a quarter. So we've done like 4 or 5 at this point, which is 100% appropriate for our stage of the organization.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things like fundamentally, that and the fact that I just don't believe in performance, like these sort of big fundamental performance reviews.
Oh, right.
It's
Yeah.
one of the things that I aligned on before starting at Airbase with our CEO, because I thought, hey, if he is looking for someone who wants to build out these like amazing like L&D programs, like it's not my jam and it's not my thing. And if I don't
Yeah.
fundamentally buy into it, I should not be the person running the people team for your organization.
Yeah. 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 No, that makes sense. You're the way you describe it, the learning and development programs are, but the way you describe it sounds a little bit like sometimes like the difference maybe between a trade school and like a liberal arts education.
Yeah.
And if you're learning how to program, or there's a specific task or something,
Yeah.
you still want creative thinking and everything, but that's more like you can learn how to be a mechanic, and here's the process for learning how to be a mechanic and put those things
Yes.
together. Not to say there's not an art to being a mechanic, but
Yeah.
then when it comes to leadership, it's almost like you want to coach or train people to use their resources, grow on your own, go through the
Yes.
processes. It's like
Yes.
liberal arts colleges teaching people how to learn, kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. It's a little bit
Exactly.
little different.
Yes. And that is going to like ultimately, right, like be the thing that ultimately like makes a really great leader is you have to find like you have to have your like own voice and like what's authentic to you. And the only way that you do that is by going on your own self-guided journey, through figuring out how to do
Yeah,
that. Like no one can give you the blueprint to you.
I'm writing that one down. Yeah, self discovery. You've got
Mm-hmm.
to figure that out, and especially if you're going to be a leader working with other people. Yeah, there's much more art to that, and less do this and this will happen, do this and this will happen, do this and this will happen.
Yeah.
So
Life doesn't work that way. And humans aren't robots. So it just doesn't work out like that.
yeah, not yet. No, I'm kidding.
Not yet.
No,
Not
no,
yet. Soon.
that soon, very soon. No.
Yes.
So, kind of in wrapping up, what trends do you see coming? What are going to be the challenges for us, for people teams, engagement teams, in the next 3 years? What are we gonna run into? Do you think?
I think everyone in the workplace right now, I think people are trying to sort of, figure out this blending and molding between, hybrid, in-person, remote work, and just sort
Hmm.
of resettling on, whatever a new normal is. I think that if one thing, that we hopefully one positive I think that hopefully came out of the pandemic, I think you will see and continue to see more and more of global workforces, which I think just continues to create like more interesting challenges and problems sort of tactically for people teams to solve, whether it's around, compensation and headcount management and engagement and, and building trust. I think you're going to see and there's a lot of companies I think that are sort of like pushing a little bit in this space where I think comp is like it's such a it is, I mean,
Oh
it
yeah,
always is such a big thing, but it's
I
such a
know.
big thing now globally, right? And sort of how do you build out these like big global programs? I think you're going to see a lot. Oh gosh, I hope a lot more integration between systems and where they sort of all like marry and
Yeah.
come together. So I think you're going to see a lot of those trends start to show up.
Where can we keep in touch with you? Where can we follow you, learn more about Airbase?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I am there. I wouldn't say I'm like the most active, but I am there.
That's
And
perfect.
if you want to see pictures of my dog, you can find me on Instagram.
Oh, fantastic. Frank, we love you. You look
Yes,
very relaxed back in the
he
corner of
is.
the
Oh,
shot. Yeah.
he is so relaxed back there. Yeah, he loved the interview.
Oh, perfect. Right on. Well, thanks for being with us, Sarah.
Thanks so much. This is really fun. Thank you, Shawn.